Are we in a housing bubble? Are we in a housing bubble? If you talk to most experts, they'll say that we're not in a housing bubble. But if you talk to everybody on the streets or in the news, what are they talking about? A bubble. They're talking about how the market's so high and it can never go up and blah, 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 blah. So the question that we have for people is, are home prices soaring across the country indication of a bubble that we're going to suffer like 2008? Now, in the first quarter, our home prices surged 12% over where they were last year. Now, that may seem like a crazy price point, but these were similar things to things we've seen in other markets at other times in our history. And it's not unlike what happened in 2006, right before the free fall of the housing market. Now, what buyers want to know is this fever breaking point, the opportunity for prices to plummet? Are they holding out for the opportunity to get a better deal? Or are they just putting themselves into a position where they're going to lose a ton of money or a ton of equity in the long run for their home? So ultimately, is this like 2008? I think the ultimate thing that people need to understand is not all bubbles or even market changes will look like 2008. There's a lot of housing market fluctuation as we go through. There's a lot of things that change and show fundamentals of inventory and market evaluation, price point changing. But ultimately, the high demand and the risk-averse lending institutions that we have today spikes the home prices and keeps prices rolling back in the future. But will it be an indication that the market will not continue to increase? The most important factor in today's market is that mortgage loans are just simply harder to get than they've been in previous years. Just to give you an idea, the MCAI, which is the Mortgage Credit Availability Index, was at 780 in June of 2006, which means that it was really, really easy to get a mortgage loan. Now, 15 years later, June of 2021, it was at 125, which is instrumental in our understanding of how easy it is for somebody to get a mortgage loan, which is the default rate on that loan. Ultimately, what we're going to see is that with the lending standards having been raised in Dodd-Frank in 2010 and 2013, what it's creating is that home buyers are purchasing homes with a smaller portion of their value and a smaller portion of their household income. Their average credit scores are higher, and you can't bluff your way into it. There's no doc loans. There's no bank loans where you're, hey, I have $100,000 in the bank, give me a loan for $500,000, like there used to be back in the day. This is a much tighter lending environment. And so ultimately, when we consider the value as it considers the mortgage environment, there's nothing similar to 2008. And I just had this conversation yesterday with somebody that was asking, hey, where are we going to be? I want the prices to fall. I feel like we're going to go off a cliff. And I said, what indicator do you see that's going to be pushing prices off a cliff? What indicator do you see that's going to be holding mortgage values down? Or what indicator do you see that the market is not going to continue to appreciate? And until somebody can answer that for me, I look back at these type of factors and say, there's nothing similar that's going to tell me that we're going to crash anything similar to what we've seen in the past, and certainly not what we've seen 12, 13 years ago. So why the increase in prices? Well, ultimately, supply and demand. The new work from home environment, the COVID pandemic and the change in the cultural experience has really allowed buyers to take their big city paychecks, to take their opportunities on the winnings from the sale of their home to a more affordable marketplace. They're not making the traverse into the city. They're not making the transition in and out, and they're easily swayed to move out into the country. Right? They're creating more opportunity in more affordable markets, moving out of larger markets and larger cities, and thus driving up the expense in those more affordable markets. Now, the utility is coming from the work from anywhere, right? Which is ultimately driving that buyer appeal to buy a larger home or move a little bit farther than they might have considered previously. But for home buyers that are fleeing those expensive cities, there's a real demand and a real value in buying in an affordable area. It's creating a drive for home supply, which is just undervaluing the demand that's out there. Now, there's no exact science to when the market will cool down. There's no exact science to when the prices will become a little bit more fashionable or reasonable, but what you can do is play the long game. Now, the longer you stay in a home, the better your chances are of creating a little bit of value and turning profit. You could buy and then sell with a $70,000 profit. It could be 2 years, it could be 10 years. But ultimately, if you play the long game to create value and buy it proportionally, you're going to protect yourself. There's another side of the coin, which is the deflated values after you sell your home, might then impact you, and you might have to pay to sell your home should a job transition or a forced move come up. But ultimately, if you manage to hold on your property for the last 13 years when the last bubble happened, you're actually going to be profiting money. Not only the money that you put into equity over the last 13 years of making mortgage payments, but you're going to be profiting money because the value of the home is higher today than it was in 2008 at the height of the bubble. So, as experts would recommend, home buyers stay in their home for 5 years. In a worst case scenario, you cover your costs of selling, you make a little bit of profit, you create a value for you and your family, ultimately buying that home that's going to make you feel more comfortable in today's post-pandemic world. But the bottom line is that we are so much more secure today than we were in 2006 and 2008. Lenders are much more risk averse and creating an environment that's harder to get a loan than we've ever been in the past. There's no reason to believe that the fundamentals of lending are going to create a bubble and the market's going to crash the way that it has in the past. If you're buying a home today and it's your primary residence and you plan on staying there for 5 years, we're going to make sure to protect you in the long run because you're going to figure it out on math that it's going to work out for you and it's going to profit for you in the long run. So anybody that's worried about a housing bubble, of course, reach out to us, PM, DM, or subscribe to the link below if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you real soon about a whole lot more. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for weekly content. Also, check out our social media pages. The links are in the description below. See you next week.